Good evening, and welcome to the Prince Hall Think Tank, a monthly conversation amongst Prince Hall Freemasons where we discuss topics relative to craft masonry. My name is Brother Antonio Caffey, and I'm a very proud past master of St. Mark's number 7, located in Columbus, Ohio, where Worshipful Brother Sean Searcy serves as Worshipful Master. My lodge was chartered in 1852 by the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, where currently the Honorable Kelvin J. Davis serves as Most Worshipful Grand Master. Before I let the other brothers introduce themselves, I would like to state that the views and opinions that are expressed by us this evening in no way reflect the views and opinions of the Grand Lodges and lodges in which we hold membership in. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them on our Facebook page or by using the chat option on our YouTube page. And if we have time at the end of the conversation, we'll try and answer some of those at that time. Lastly, if you're on YouTube and if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and click that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date with all things Think Tank. At this time, I'll let the other brethren introduce themselves. Brother Collins.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ken Collins. I'm a member of Tuxedo Lodge number 431 out of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Grand Accepted Masons of Alabama, where I serve as the Grand Historian. Corey D. Hawkins Sr., Esquire, serves as the Most Worshipful Grand Master, and the Honorable Gunnery Sergeant is our Worshipful Master. Good to be with everybody again. We've been on a little hiatus, but we're back and up and running. But again, it's good to be back with everyone. Gunnery Sergeant Walter Green, United States Marine Corps, USMC retired. Sorry about that, Worshipful Master, I forgot. But again, it's good to be with everybody and look forward to the topic tonight. Brother Morgan.
Good evening, everybody. This is James R. Morgan III, past master of Corinthian Lodge number 18, here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where my worshipful master is none other than Leroy G. McDonald II. I have the pleasure and honor of serving as Grand Historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, where the Honorable Quincy G. Gant is serving as our Most Worshipful Grand Master. All is well here in D.C. I want to thank everybody again, because I'm still getting well wishes and whatnot from the recent government shutdown. So I want to thank everybody for your concern. Y'all can still send donations to me. I'll still take them. It's quite all right. but other than that, all's well here in DC, and I'm so thankful to be back here on the Prince Hall Think Tank. Brother Gillarm.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brother Dave Gillarm. I'm a past master of the Mount Pisgah Lodge number 53, located in Columbus, Georgia, where our worshipful master is Brother Christopher Gainey. I also have the pleasure of serving as the worshipful Grand Historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, where the Honorable Bruce H. James serves as our 17th Most Worshipful Grand Master. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a very informational show. I brought out my good luck charm for the show. You all see it. I know there's going to be some haters, but this necklace right here is going to bring some powerful information for this show. So if you get a necklace just like this, you can bring powerful information too. So we're gonna go ahead, turn it back over to Brother Caffey, and we can get this party started.
All right. Next time I'll wear a necklace or something. Make it happen. So tonight's show is, I saw it on the internet, Anti-Masonry and Masonic myths. So, even before I came into the craft many years ago, I'd always heard about the Masons. Growing up in the 80s and then attending college in the 90s, there were many books written about Masonry, some good, some bad. Many books detailed, our bloodthirsty oaths that we took. A lot of them detailed how we were part of an upcoming new world order, and some even suggested that the many fish fries that we have are just a plot to put some type of mind-altering formula into the society. So actually, that book, I just made that up. We didn't do that, but that's actually the current book that I'm writing right now about our fish fry batter and how we're going to take over the world. But the point is, all of these myths out there, and I think with the advent of the internet and social media, you know, it's growing. You know, those myths are still out there. So tonight, we're just going to take a look at some of those myths. You know, we're going to take a look at the whole concept of the anti-Masonic movement and how a lot of those myths came out of that. And we hope to dispel a few of those myths and give an overview, as I said, about how they came about through the anti-Masonic movement. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our good brother, James Morgan.
Oh, well, thank you, Brother Caffey. I think this is a very important topic for us to be discussing because, you know, we live in a time now known as the information age, and we know that there's information and there's also misinformation. I, like you, was exposed to a lot of anti-Masonic information or misinformation prior to joining, and I still find myself every now and again running into somebody who believes the nonsense, so to speak, about who we are, what Masonry is, what it's about. I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about this and specifically about anti-Masonry in the African American community. In trying to look at this topic, one book that I do want to make sure that I make reference to for folks is right here. Is It True What They Say About Freemasonry, which is by brothers Arturo De Hoyos and Dr. S. Brent Morris, good friends of mine, and I definitely recommend you check this particular book out. The thing about anti-Masonry, which is interesting, when you go back and look at the history of it, we find early in Europe that anti-Masonic sentiments, because again, this whole idea of this secret organization, what are they really doing? What are they talking about? As we move into the early United States, Freemasonry really begins being seen as a benevolent organization, as well as one that is somewhat patriotic. We know that the Morgan affair, which happened in the early 1800s, no relation to me, was an event that really crippled, quote unquote, mainstream Freemasonry because of the alleged kidnapping and alleged murder of Captain William Morgan, who had threatened to expose Masonic ritual and secrets and whatnot, and allegedly some of his own lodge brothers in New York, had him done away with and whatnot. The story is kind of vague at that point, but we know that it caught enough wind in the press that it literally crippled a lot of white Masonic lodges, and Grand Lodges for that matter. In my historical study of this, and I've discussed this with these brothers here on the think tank as well as others, I believe that the Morgan affair period, which was really a low ebb for white American Freemasonry, really was an era that helped Prince Hall Freemasonry really to grow and flourish and kind of formalize itself in the years leading up to the formation of the National Grand Lodge and several of our early Grand Lodges, like here in DC and Ohio and what have you. And I think that when you look at anti-Masonry in white America versus Black America, it's really a different story, because for years Masonic lodges represented something different in Black America than they did in white America. Okay, so you're not going to find as much, and this is just, again, my own study. You may find something different. I couldn't find as many anti-Masonic sentiments in terms of the conspiratorial aspects, where black people really talking about, oh, the Masons, they're evil and they're this. I didn't really find that as much. I did find, however, early references to non-members in the Black community not understanding the role of Freemasonry, the importance of it to its members. We know that early in the AME Church's history, although here on this platform, we did an entire episode discussing the link historically between Prince Hall Freemasonry and African Methodism, there was a push early on to rid the AME clergy of Masonic members and to try to force those who were members to sever their ties to the lodges. Bishop Daniel Payne, who I believe we're actually celebrating his birthday today, if I'm not mistaken, he actually noted that such a effort was basically an effort in futility, because there were so many Masons involved in the AME church that if you got rid of them, there would be no more AME church. Okay. So you find that reference. You will find reference to, someone who I think we all should have a profound respect for as well, Frederick Douglass, making the statement that because he was not a Mason, there was an interest at one time here in DC to try to get him to join our Grand Lodge, but he did not have an interest in that. We have seen references to him saying that he believed that black men had more important things to do with their time than to play dress up. That to him is what Freemasonry was. It was men playing dress up and whatnot, and he really didn't understand the significance for brothers of that time period, such as his former business partner Martin Delany. Okay, if you go back and look at the relationship between Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany, there was a split between the two of them, and this happens around the time that Douglass makes this statement. There were other issues, of course, but this is something else that we have to factor in. As we move forward through the years, what we find is that when you start getting into the early years of the what some would refer to as Black nationalism, Afrocentrism, etc., although it wasn't being called that at the time, you start to get other organizations popping up that, in my opinion, were serving similar purposes and may have seen Freemasonry to some extent as a form of competition for members, for money, or what have you, such as the Nation of Islam, who I have a deep respect for, mind you. But historically speaking, you'll find where groups like the Nation of Islam, the Moorish Science Temple, a number of other organizations at the dawn of the 20th century, who begin to kind of speak out against Freemasonry and try to get their members to cease being part of their Masonic lodges and Eastern Star chapters. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was the essential organizer of the Nation of Islam, actually penned a book, which I have on the shelf. I should have pulled it out, called "The Secrets of Freemasonry: That Which You Should Know." Right, where he's trying to say that Freemasonry and its rituals and whatnot aren't even meant for Black people, that it's something that's white people stuff, that they need that. And that's a sentiment that you'll hear over time throughout the 20th century down to the 21st century, this racialization of Freemasonry being either something for white people, and then later on, once you get into the publication of books like Stolen Legacy, which doesn't really speak to Masonry specifically, but it does in a way. Then later on you get to this idea of, well, Freemasonry is something that white people took from Black people or took from ancient Egypt or what have you, and has now regurgitated and put out there, and so we shouldn't be practicing Freemasonry as it's practiced today. We should go back to whatever we were doing in Africa, and you get this whole thing. So there's this kind of there's an admirable disdain in some circles for Freemasonry. On the one hand, it was taken from Africa, but then the European took it, and now, what are we doing as Black men being involved in Freemasonry? You get that sentiment in certain sectors. Okay, most recently, the Philaxis Society just produced a special issue talking about that very issue of the idea of an African influence on Freemasonry. Is it real? Is it not? And that discussion has occurred between Dr. Jeff Menzies and Brother Tahuti Evans, who's been on the show before. As we move down to more modern times, and this is something that that is kind of scary to me as I begin to close out. What we find is that now, whereas before there was a historical narrative and a certain level of understanding of what Freemasonry was about, even if it was misguided, right? There were still reference points. And you had organizations, as I mentioned earlier, like the Nation of Islam or whoever, that in some ways were competing against Freemasonry. Now we're in this internet era where there isn't, in my view, there isn't as much deep thought or deep study about anything, in the popular society, right? And so if it can't reach I forget how many characters it is on Twitter, but if you can't say it in those characters, then people don't want to read it as much. And so what has happened now is there's a generational, for lack of a better term, ignorance or a lack of knowledge of what Freemasonry really is, particularly Prince Hall Freemasonry. So what has happened is now you have a generation like of my own that I belong to that has been introduced to it or reintroduced to Freemasonry through Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code and Lost Symbol. You've got movies like National Treasure out there now and whatnot, where all these fantastical stories, and some of it portraying Masonry in a good light, some of it not so good, but there's a general ignorance, not only about what Freemasonry really is, but even worse, an ignorance about what Prince Hall Freemasonry is in our history. Our story hasn't been told on the History Channel documentaries or what have you that are out there. And so it's left the modern day observer who doesn't watch the Prince Hall think tank, it's left them kind of in a quandary where they'll just accept anything. Not everybody, of course, but a lot of people are just accepting anything because in part they don't know the story. And we, particularly as Prince Hall Masons and Eastern Stars or what have you, we have to be the ones to tell our story and put it in proper context. That's why for me, Brother Joseph Walks, Dr. Charles Wesley, Harry A. Williamson, and others who have preserved that history are really giants of who were once among us, because they preserved that story and have shown how this organization contributed not only to history generally, but to African American history specifically. It is my hope personally that in telling that story and continuing to tell the story of who we are and what we are truly about, not just from an esoteric aspect, but also from a very practical aspect, that in doing that, we can help combat anti-Masonry in the African American community and bring ourselves back into proper context for not just for ourselves, but also for the communities around us, for our families, what have you. One last thing that I'll say, and then I'll turn it over, is that early in my Masonic career, I was actually at a family function, and I was being introduced. You know how it is. You meet this cousin that they knew you when you was a baby, and all that type of stuff. I happen to have on a suit, and I happen to have on a Masonic lapel pin. This relative of mine made a rude remark about my being a Mason to my face, and I was very taken back by that. And later on, this person, broke out and said they would pray for me, and that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm all this and third. So even in our own families, anti-Masonry can come out if we're not prepared properly to tell our story. And that doesn't mean you have to argue with every single person that doesn't agree with your membership. But to me, it does mean that we should, at least to some extent, be engaging with our communities so that they have a better understanding of who we are, who are those men in those black suits and those women in those dresses, and what it is that we're really doing to contribute to the broader society in our private lives as well as a collective. So with that being said, thank you.
Thank you, Brother Morgan. And I guess I just want to put a question out there to you, and actually to the other brothers as well. And I think maybe in a transition from what your presentation was and what Brother Collins was going to present. But you made a point when you said, I guess us engaging as an organization, engaging with the community as a means, I guess, as one of the means to combat some of these ideas. And how do you think, why do you think that doesn't occur? And how do you think, I guess, even on an elementary lodge level, that can start to help some of this?
Well, I think that how we do that is I understand that we have certain aspects of our practice that are not public. Okay. I think that people, especially when you do the day-to-day life of Freemasonry and whatnot, I I think that the secrecy aspect of Freemasonry, while it does exist, I think sometimes it gets overplayed, even by us. And so when I say engaging in the community, I think that you can do that in a number of ways. Making sure that your lodge, your district, or your Grand Lodge, or what have you, is participating in local politics, not in terms of electoral politics, but in your civic, community boards or what have you. What's it called? Neighborhood watch. Going to those type of meetings, making sure you're represented in those type of events or what have you. If your local area is having a block party, is your local lodge and chapter, are you guys donating money? Are you contributing? Are you opening up your lodge? I know some lodges that where they use their lodge for as polling stations. In a healthy community and lodge relationship, the lodge building really becomes a community space, although we know we do have our private activities, right? I have to say this also as a historian as well, that with my recent book, what I've tried to do is to try to have it present, not just in Masonic events, but also I go to, even today I was at a lecture. I try to make sure that I'm present at other historical societies, genealogy societies, what have you, and that I'm still telling our story, but communicating it in a way that the broader community can appreciate it. I think that sometimes we lose that aspect, and I know that Ken is probably going to expand on this more, but we have to be engaged with our communities, because at the end of the day, whether we realize it or not, it's from those communities that we're going to get our new members, hopefully, right? And we want the wisest and best of them. So we have to be engaged. We have to be present. You don't have to always wear a shirt. You don't have to, recruit anybody, anything like that. But I think just being present sometimes is half the battle. And that's something that we've struggled with in some areas.
Yeah, and I think by engaging the community, you get advocates that can help you fight that battle.
Right. Right.
So that it's not always us trying to make the point, but you have people that are able to say, well, the Masons that I know, A, B, and C. The
right,
Masons
exactly.
that I know,
exactly,
they do this. So then your work speaks for itself, but it speaks to other people.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing that happened to me recently here in DC. We have an annual Feed the Seniors Day for around Thanksgiving time, and that we work with Councilwoman Breon Nadeau here, and so I've been at almost every one of them except this past year, working and whatnot. And one day I saw Councilwoman Nadeau walking down the street, and she was pregnant at the time, and her and one of her aides and whatnot. And I just walked by. I didn't think she would remember me, and she said, "Oh, hey James, how you doing?" And we started talking. She's introducing me to one of her aides and telling her, "Oh yeah, this is James. He's the historian for the Prince Hall Masons and stuff." That's a relationship. That's a connection. Every time I see her, it's like a first name basis. You see what I'm saying? I don't know that she'll ever join our lodge or a chapter or a chapter rather. Mind you, she's Caucasian, right? But that's a relationship there. We have to build more relationships like that. Not so much necessarily just with elected officials, but even with other business leaders. I was very proud of our Grand Lodge and our Grand Master recently at our Black History Month program, which sometimes we have these Black History Month programs, not just DC, but just period, where we're doing these programs just for our members. This year, our Grand Master, I think he opened it up more to the community. We had some local business leaders come in who got awards and recognitions and stuff. Again, that's a relationship that's being watered.
All right, thank you, Brother Morgan. Brother Collins.
Hey, well, I want to start. This is an extremely interesting topic, specifically for the public when dealing with not only Prince Hall Freemasonry, but just Freemasonry in general. And before I get in conversations like this on topics like this, in public settings, and even in private settings, and also in what we consider the social media platforms. You have to take a very, very deliberate step back and get a baseline for who you're having the conversation with. Because most of the people that wind up, let me step back. There are three types of people that are typically the individuals that end up perpetuating the negative stereotypes and myths regarding Freemasonry. One is the person who wanted to join but got blackballed, or they could not join. Two is the individual who was a member and then got kicked out, or the individual who was a member but at the same time left Freemasonry and is trying to find some way, shape, or form of finding some type of notoriety. And I say those for a specific reason, because the individuals that have never been Freemasoners are somehow the experts on Freemasonry, when one of the key objects of Freemasonry is the initiatory experience. And I think that can go across the board for any of the fraternal organizations. The initiatory experience of the individual having absolutely no true meaning in an organization, and then actually stepping into to become a member of the organization. And then when they leave, I mean, don't get me wrong, some people leave, some people had some ill will, but again, it goes back to the myths and the myths and et cetera, that end up getting injected. And as we continue this conversation, I really want people to take a note at who the individual is that's purveying the information. Some quick ancient myths regarding Prince Hall Freemasonry. So we can go ahead and check these things off the list because I saw it on the internet. Prince Hall and a group of other men were made Freemasons in 1775. It's a myth. It's not true. 1775 never happened. 1778, you saw men that participated in the initiatory experience. We have the records. We've seen the records. There is no arguing with it. And if you have something otherwise, please produce it. I have a black hat. I'll write crow on it, and I'll put hot sauce on it and eat it. If you have something that is, what do we call it? A primary source document that can refute it. I'm happy to come on air and eat the hat. Second thing, Prince Hall was never a provincial Grand Master of anything. Prince Hall was never a provincial Grand Master of anything. I don't care if the person is the grand historian for a particular area, for a Grand Lodge. He was never a provincial Grand Master. There is absolutely not a shred of documentary evidence or primary source evidence to state otherwise. In fact, there is primary source evidence coming from the Grand Lodge of England, well, the United Grand Lodge of England, which was the offspring of the Grand Lodge of England, which was the progenitor of the United Grand Lodge of England, that says that he was ever deputized as a provincial Grand Master. Irish Lodge number 441, never initiated, passed, and raised Prince Hall and his cohorts. Mr. Bat did. Mr. Bat did on his own. Again, the initiatory experience. We have the records, and it shows us, and it's a flat line. I know it might cause some heartburn with folks, but when you look at the records, there is no irrefuting it. another topic that has to be kind of laid out is the ongoing verbal jousting regarding AF and AM versus F and AM. The ancients' distinction between the moderns. In ancient times, there were two different Grand Lodges in England, one ancient, one moderns. They had two different initiatory experiences to include how they conducted themselves in their constitutions, the way that they interacted with each other. That was the major gripe. The two Grand Lodges came together to form the Grand Lodge of England. Again, there is no difference in modern day AF and AM and free and accepted Masons. Typically, AF and AM is espoused amongst what we call, quote unquote, the in the United States, that is, quote unquote, the mainstream Grand Lodges use AF and AM, while some mainstream Grand Lodges use AF and AM. Some use F and AM, like the Grand Lodge of Alabama and the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama both use free and accepted Masons. And then you also have AFM, which I believe the Grand Lodge of South Carolina utilizes. And then you also have FAAM, which the Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia utilizes. So in modern times, there is no distinction between the two. It's just the moniker that the Grand Lodges chose to utilize. Amongst the Prince Hall Grand Lodges, once we got into the 1950s, the Hot Springs setting, where all of the Prince Hall Grand Lodges agreed to utilize the term Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, other than two that utilize it today, and that's the Most Worshipful Stringer Grand Lodge, as well as the Most Worshipful Union Grand Lodge. All of us use free and accepted Masons, other than the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Liberia, which utilizes AF and AM. There's no distinction. We have to throw a caveat in there. Clandestine Masons utilize or attempt to utilize the term AF and AM as a means of legitimizing themselves. And they also try to use the term of ancient and accepted Scottish Rite Freemasons as a terminology to legitimize themselves. So you have to be extremely careful when you're dealing with individuals and how they're utilizing terminology in order to somehow keep the legitimacy conversation going. Another myth amongst the topic of Freemasonry that we have to go ahead and shoot down. Freemasonry, through the initiatory experience, through the obligatory experience, through what we call the Constitution, or the constituting of lodges, that is the sequence of how lodges are created, from a senior Grand Lodge to a subordinate body. The subordinate bodies meet in order to form another Grand Lodge. Grand Lodges are not created through the State Department of State incorporation documents. Let me repeat that. A Grand Lodge, or a legitimate Masonic body, is not and cannot be created merely through filing a piece of paper. And now me and a group of men have filed a piece of paper, and now we are a legitimate Masonic body. That's one of the major topic areas that you can go ahead and scratch off the list. Another major area that we really need to highlight is the infamous Pike Luciferian doctrine. Albert Pike is not everything about Freemasonry. What Albert Pike says is not law in Freemasonry. Sorry. Luciferian doctrine, to include the Tanso hoax, saying that Lucifer is God, is a hoax. There is absolutely no truth to that. In fact, the largest purveyor of and leaders in Freemasonry were actually ministers of the gospel. And I'm saying it from the Prince Hall side, from the propagation of the AME Church, the AME Zion Church, the African Methodist, the African Methodist Episcopal, the AME Zion, the CME, to include the Baptist Church. All of them were God-fearing men, and none of them would participate in anything that has anything to do with sacrificing people's children, which is it's just absolutely absurd that some people could actually say things of that ilk.
Please say that again.
There is absolutely no sacrificial nothing in the initiatory experience. That's a honest to God truth that I can tell anyone that has been told that lie. And a lot of times, and I have to go back to what we spoke of before, it's typically individuals. Matter of fact, one of the individuals I've known for well over almost 15 or almost going on 19, 20 years is now an anti-Mason because of heartburn of when he left the organization. Now everything the Masons did is ungodly, when he knows that even in Prince Hall Freemasonry, this is something that I don't have an issue with talking about. We over Christianize Freemasonry, which is supposed to be a secular organization that allows men to practice their own faith individually, while the organization remains a secular organization. There has been absolutely, and I can say in my experience of being both a Prince Hall Mason to also visiting numerous mainstream lodges, there is no I've never seen anything of that ilk, and I'm saying that from a personal standpoint, to include both the York Rite side as well as the Scottish Rite side, as well as the ancient craft masonry. So that those type of things are not there. Another myth is that the John G. Jones organizations are related to Prince Hall Freemasonry. That's one of the biggest myths ever. They are not. They are not. They are not. None of those organizations were legally chartered from a competent body. They were chartered through a legal process, and a legal process is merely filling out incorporation documents saying that I'm a part of this organization, and that's the claim to fame. So I'm going to end my spiel there, and I'm very happy to talk to anybody about refuting anything that we've talked about thus far.
All right, thank you, brother. So yeah, that's why I had to have you repeat that line, because that's one of the ones that's always irked me, as far as the devil worshiping myths and different things that are out there. It doesn't make any logical sense, you know. And one point that you made that that used to help me out when I guess when I used to engage in conversations more. I used to engage in those conversations more years ago than I do now. I just don't have the time for them. But it's a person telling you about Freemasonry that's never gone through the process to become a Freemason, let alone, you know, put some years in or some experience. You know, they've either looked at one YouTube show or read one book that's not sourced or anything, and then it makes them expert on Freemasonry. So, you know, yeah, I could sit up here all day with stories about that, but for the sake of time, which, you know, I don't want to keep everyone on here all night. One thing I'm going to talk about right now are two specific myths, and if you can bear with me, I want to bring this up, and as all of you know, when it comes to bringing up my screens, sharing sometimes, it's not always the best. So I rely on my good brothers to walk me through it sometimes. Like I'm some like 50-year-old, like actually 60 or 70-year-old challenged man.
You know, I'm holding back on you, Brother Cap.
All right, am I up, brothers?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, first try. I'm getting better at this. It only took like 30-some shows.
Look at God.
All right, so I want to quickly talk about the $2 bill and our good friend John Hanson. So I'm going to talk about the $2 bill first, because I can remember coming into the craft. You know, when I first came into the craft, I was given a $2 bill by another brother, and you know, being new, I didn't know why he really presented it to me at first. You know, I was in college, so I was just happy to have $2. But the brother asked me if I knew the significance of that $2 bill, and I said, nah, no, I had no idea. So then he said that he had me flip the $2 over, and he pointed out what appeared to be a dark-skinned individual and asked me, who was that? Did I know who that was? And I said no. And he told me that was actually Prince Hall, who was present at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but was not allowed to sign it because he was black. Again, me being young, both in age and also within my Masonic career, I took the brother for at his word, and I felt very proud that the namesake of my fraternity was on the back of the $2 bill. And as I think back on it now, and some of the myths that are out there and why they're still perpetuated, I think some of it, if we're honest, even looking back at it, I've always held Grimshaw did a lot of this too, as far as the different myths and different things he put out there. It was something, some of these things are proud to hold on to. When Freemasons talk about the goat, and riding the goat or whatever, it puffs your chest out, and because that person that, again, as Ken said, that didn't go through that process, you're just making this organization sound, like it's otherworldly, and it's just this big thing that you're a part of. So for me to have this $2 bill that's in circulation with the black man on it, let alone that black man is Prince Hall, and I'm a member of the Prince Hall fraternity, again, I felt proud. But it really didn't dawn on me until some years later that this just wasn't true. And what was more troubling for me was, again, looking back at it, if I would have only done a little bit of research, I would have known that it wasn't true. So, I was, and I'm always honest when I talk about certain things and certain aspects of Freemasonry. And I was one who, for a number of years, again, when I first came into the craft, perpetuated this myth with new brothers coming into the craft until I found out the truth myself. So, yeah, it was just always interesting. So what, obviously, like I said, that wasn't Prince Hall. And then, after that myth died down a little bit, then you also had the myth of John Hanson popping up, who, that all of a sudden it went from Prince Hall to that was John Hanson, which I'll talk about who exactly that was in a minute. But let's examine the $2 bill right quick. So from 1862 to the present, the federal government issued actually many different types of currency notes in the $2 denomination. So the $2 bill that's currently out in circulation, although on a limited basis, it wasn't the $2 bill that had been in circulation from the beginning, like I said, around 1862. There have actually been 6 different versions of the $2 note. Prior to the note that I'm showing right now, for almost a century into the present day, the portrait of Thomas Jefferson had been the key design feature on the front of the $2 note. So that's changed a little bit, but the as pictured here in 1869, So his photo in some way, shape, or form has appeared on the front of the $2 bill, and the back has seen many different type of changes. So actually, this is Alexander Hamilton. He was on the first $2 bill, and then Thomas Jefferson assumed that role in years moving forward. So that's 1869. And then in 1928, again, we see Jefferson, and then his home, Monticello, is on the back of the $2 bill. So in 1976, actually, to celebrate the bicentennial of the United States, the Treasury Department decided to introduce a new $2 bill. Front of it would look similar to this bill here, but again, to celebrate the bicentennial, they actually wanted they chose to use a vignette based on the painting Declaration of Independence by John Trumbull, which was a 12 by 18 foot oil on canvas painting. So that's the painting that this photo was based off of. And actually, on another side note, the painting isn't actually the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but it actually shows a 5-man drafting committee presenting the draft of the Declaration to the Congress in an event that took place on June 28, 1776. So while the painting clearly shows, and I'll leave it up there for a second, and if you can find a black man in that picture, please let me know. So again, the painting clearly shows that a black man isn't present, you know, and this is the painting that, again, this photo is taken off of. You know, you still have people perpetuate the myth that a black man exists on the back of the $2 bill. So now, if you look at the back of the $2 bill, which is on the left, and then I cropped the pictures on the right to match the people that are in the on the back of the $2 bill. If you look at the $2 bill and you look at the person on the left, or the $2 bill on the left, where I have the red arrow pointing to, if you look at it, the person does appear to be darker than the other individuals. I won't say he's a black man, but I'll say he's darker than the other individuals. However, if you look at the painting, again, which the $2 bill is based off of, that individual that's in that painting isn't a black man. So, I mean, there could be a number of reasons why, you know, that person is darker on the $2 bill. A lot of times when you talk about typecasting and coming up with the designs for certain things, a lot of times when you're trying to reproduce something, you know, and then you're using dyes, it doesn't always work out, or it's not always clear as the original print. But there may be a number of reasons why that may have taken place. And actually, the actual person that that's highlighted on both the picture and the back of the $2 bill is Robert Morris of Pennsylvania. All right. The Hansons. We said they could have been a singing group, Hanson and Hanson. So the myth of John Hanson. So like I said, I mentioned earlier that, you know, after the myth of Prince Hall being on the $2 bill, I guess after that got played out, then, you know, you have some people move on to John Hanson being the black person that was also on the $2 bill. And, you know, I think over the years that that myth has been, you know, like I said, you know, when it was moved from Prince Hall to John Hanson. And in fact, the myth actually states that not only was John Hanson a black person that appeared on the back of the $2 bill, but he was also supposedly the first president of the United States. Again, this is not true. So unfortunately, people confuse either on purpose or by, you know, or they just make an honest mistake, the two John Hansons. So the John Hanson on the right was actually a merchant and public official from Maryland during the era of the American Revolution. And he was born in 1721. During that time, under the Articles of Confederation, which were the predecessor to the Constitution, it called for a president to be appointed. So 8 men were actually appointed to serve 1-year terms as president under the Articles of Confederation. And in 1781, John Hanson on the right became the first president of the United States in Congress assembled under the Articles of Confederation. The John Hanson on the left, who died in 1860, was actually a part of the American Colonialization Society, and he actually helped repatriate ex-enslaved Africans back to Liberia. He was elected to the Colonial Council in Liberia in December 1840, and after Liberia won its independence, or was given its independence, he was actually chosen as one of 2 senators from his the area that he lived in Liberia. So, honest mistake, if you just Google John Hanson, first president, a lot of times, because people research it so much and Google's algorithms or whatever, the John Hanson on the left will pop up. And it's interesting when I'm having conversations with people, because people post this all the time as far as the first black president. The first president of the United States was John Hanson, a black man, blah, blah, blah. The article that I post to, refute that is an article that was actually well written by the Nation of Islam, that said, which I find ironic, because as Brother Morgan said earlier, I'm also a supporter of a lot of things they do, but they subscribe to some myths regarding Masonry as well. But my point is, look, if the Nation of Islam is saying this isn't true, you know that it's not true. So, but for whatever reason, it's still out there. But so, you can do a lot of research and, dig in some books and get first source material to disprove this myth. But if we just apply a little bit of common sense to this claim, we come to an obvious conclusion. The John Hanson, the picture of John Hanson on the left is an actual photo. It's not a painting. It's a photo. So photography wasn't really in vogue and wasn't a commercial thing until the mid 1800s. So if this was supposed to be the first president of the United States, or the Continental Congress, or however you want to frame it, photography wasn't invented back then. So how could they take a picture of this person? So again, with some of these things, you don't have to dig a lot. You can just, if you step back and just ask yourself some logical questions, you'll come to some logical conclusions. And I think as a researcher, something, not even as a researcher, it frustrates me sometimes when people choose, again, for whatever reason, not to do that. But again, that's just me. So again, the Hansons, and obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat right there. But please, well, if you don't take away anything from that, let's stop using that, because that irks me. When we talk about John Hanson and the $2 bill, and what irks me even more, and I always gauge, and I tell the brothers this too, that I know our job will be done, and we can retire the think tank when this next topic that Brother Gillarm is going to cover, when that's done finally, and we get everybody on the same page with that, then our work is done, and I'll retire. So without further ado, Brother Gillarm. And I purposely, I'll tell before you start, when we come up with like the order of things we want to do on the show, I try to line it up to, I want to, what do I want to leave the audience with, that night, like what's the last thing. And when Brother Gillarm told me he was doing this, I said, boom, we got to leave people with this. And hopefully this can be a final for future generations, they can look back at this and say, this what ended this. So, Brother Gilmar, take it away.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Caffey. I guess I'll go ahead and get started. All right, I take it everybody can see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, before I get into this, one other myth, I think we might have mentioned this already, was about the Boston Tea Party. I've always been a fan of history. So even before I became a Mason, there were certain dates that was already stuck in my head. And one of the things that I was told after being initiated was that the real reason why the Boston Tea Party happened was because they were looking for the charter that was granted to Prince Hall and African Lodge. Well, if you look at the dates between the two events, like I don't have this in my presentation, but for you all watching this, write down a date for the Boston Tea Party. We've already addressed the 1775 myth, but even if you were to go with that, even if you a firm believer that Prince Hall and the 14 others were made in 1775, if you want to stick with that instead of 1778, you can go.
Brother Gilmar?
You see that? So yes.
Oh, you blacked out there for a second.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at these dates, you will see the two events don't even make sense. There was no way that the Boston Tea Party happened because they were looking for a charter, unless they had the ability to jump in a time machine and be able to search something that hadn't happened yet. So that's one big myth that I was told as an apprentice, and as soon as I was told this, I knew right away that it wasn't true. But one of the biggest things that we see that I get in every group, every year, and it's been going for at least the last 8 to 10 years or more, is about Dr. King being made a Mason after his death. And I've heard several different variations of Dr. King being Mason. The first thing was that he was the internist at the time of his death. Then he was a fellow craft at the time of his death. Then he was a master Mason at the time of his death. Then he was, and then he died in 1999. Past Grand Master Barksdale made him a Mason. So there are several different versions of Dr. King being a Mason that I've personally heard. And hopefully, at the end of this, we're going to nip that in the bud, and we will never see on any Facebook or any social media platform or anywhere or be repeated in any lodges that Dr. King was a Mason. This is a quote from an article written by Brother Todd Creason. A great brother. Talked to him, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about this article, and he actually stated in, like, I guess there may have been 2 revisions of his article or something like that, but he stated in the last one regarding the King being a Mason that it was obvious that he wasn't a Mason. But the story goes, it was widely reported in 1999 that the most worshipful brother, Benjamin P. Barksdale, Grandmaster Prince Hall Freemasonry in Georgia, posthumously made Dr. King a Mason at sight. So that was the story. And that's what's been burning up the internet. And every year, Dr. King's birthday, Black History Month, you'll keep seeing this being repeated, that he was made a Mason posthumously in 1999. But with every myth, it has to start somewhere. There has to be some type, I feel that there's usually some type of event that sparks this conversation or these stories to be told. And this is it. This is what sparked it. On the left, we have past Grandmaster Benjamin Barksdale. Right beside him, we have Martin Luther King III, and to the right, we have Mr. Scott King. This was a ceremony that my Grand Lodge, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Georgia, participated in honoring Dr. King on the anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech at Morehouse. With this event, now there are several other pictures regarding it. You had Maynard Jackson, you had, I believe it was Dean Carter, you had all these men aprons on stage. You knew something was happening, but you didn't quite know what. And as a Mason, if you see Dr. King being honored by a Grand Master in full dress and the Grand Lodge being requested to come there in full Masonic regalia, you would think something else is happening. That wasn't the case with this situation at all. Dr. King was very involved in, not use involved in quotation marks, with our Grand Lodge. The office of the Southern Leadership Conference was located in 330 Auburn Avenue, which was our Grand Lodge at the time. And his office was located on the first floor. Daddy King, John Wesley Dobbs, who was Grandmaster, were very good friends. Dr. King grew up going to past Grandmaster Dobbs' house and playing with his daughters. So he was very involved in us, and you've probably seen I did a video where Dr. King spoke inside my lodge on July 1st, 1958. He did this quite often. He appeared in Masonic lodges, so he was very well. He knew about Prince Hall Masonry. He did a lot of things with the Civil Rights Movement, and our Grand Lodge involvement in that. It was just a connection between us and Dr. King. So to honor him, what past Grandmaster Barksdale chose to do was very intense. It had meaning to our Grand Lodge because Dr. King meant so much to us. And that's what we chose to do. As you see here, this is at Morehouse, and you have the square and compass. We helped do the dedication. But now the story, it why circulation happened in 1999. For starters, this event here did not happen in 1999. This happened in 2000. And there are only 4 entries in our 2000 proceedings concerning Dr. King. The first 2 located in past Grandmaster Barksdale's address. Just do not get caught up in talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, or talk about Martin Luther King. Do not get caught up in talking about the King's dream. Second is over the past year, I think I know how Dr. ML King, as he traveled across the country, trying to bring freedom for the oppressed and downtrodden. And then he goes into his activities for the year. He starts in 1999, and then he ends up in 2000. And there are only 2 instances where he talks about anything regarding Morehouse. And the first one, when he met with Dr. Carter. And he talks about the ceremony where it's not just honoring Dr. King, it's going to honor Gandhi as well, and Miss Bethune-Cookman. So these 3 are going to be honored at the same time. So it wasn't just about Dr. King. And then on April 2nd, he says that the Prince Hall family participated and conducted the ceremony of unveiling the I Have a Dream speech of Dr. ML King Jr. So these are the only instances where Dr. King is even mentioned in our 2000 proceedings. And so the event didn't happen in 1999, it happened in 2000, but somehow it started circulating that he was made a Mason posthumously at this event. And that completely did not happen at all. It's not mentioned anywhere in our proceedings. It says absolutely nothing about Dr. King and Mason at any point in time. And then the backtrack, when Dr. King died, since he meant so much to our Grand Lodge, now it is an oral tradition They'll say it's an oral tradition. There is no documentation where, it was stated in this internet article that Dr. King was supposed to be made a Mason after return from Memphis. There is absolutely no documentation for that. I'm gonna say it once again. It's an oral tradition that past Grandmaster X.L. Neal, who was also a Morehouse grad, was gonna make Dr. King a Mason once he returned, and of course he never did. But that's just oral tradition. We also know that Daddy King was a Mason. We have for that. And the article also says that his grandfather was a Mason. We have no proof of that. There is rumors that he was part of another organization, but as of today, no documentation is represented showing that his grandfather was a member of anything other than the church. So when Dr. King died, it was mentioned in our grand proceedings, and the Grand Master at the time, X.L. Neal, asked prayers for Dr. King and Robert F. Kennedy. And then we passed a resolution for the deaths of those two as well. So to go back to the other part of the story, if Dr. King would have been a Mason at the time, after Mason at the time of his death, it would have been mentioned in our Grand Lodge proceedings when he died. And we also have the list of every deceased Master Mason in the state of Georgia, in the jurisdiction of Georgia, from 1968. So if somebody wants to see that, I can post that in the Prince Hall Think Tank group or wherever you want to see it at. So you can clearly see that Dr. King's name is not mentioned anywhere. So I guess in conclusion, hopefully we kill this rumor about Dr. King being made a Mason posthumously. And once again, everything that I presented came from these proceedings, our 2000 proceedings regarding the event that happened in Morehouse, and I have the 1968 proceedings to show what our Grand Lodge did for Dr. King, or how we honor him after his death. So if you have after this, if you're still confused about Dr. King being made posthumously, let me know. I will try to help clarify it even more. Well, hopefully what I just presented will help you understand that the story about Dr. King being made posthumously never happened.
Thank you, brother. So, in short, there's nothing written anywhere in the proceedings, both in the 60s or, as you said, in the 2000s, that allude to him actually being a member or made a Mason, either before he died or after he died. There's nothing there.
Nothing at all.
Okay. And it's interesting, like you said, I mean, there are certain times of the year where, it's clockwork. Like, we're going to see this, this is going to pop up. Okay, then now it's the summertime, so this rumor it's like you can set your clock to it almost. We're just going to hear these things over and over and over again. So I don't know. We'll just keep on fighting the good fight, and hopefully we'll be able to make some inroads for the future generations.
Hey, brother Caffey. Speaking of fighting a good fight, man, I'm looking at the chat here, and it is going down, man. I mean, honestly, I don't know if we did a good job or not tonight, because I'm looking at some of the comments and some of the myths that folks are talking about are things I've never even heard before. To be honest with you, I'm laughing, but somebody's asking about for some reason this whole debate has come up about, is the Earth flat? And Masons were hiding the fact that the Earth is flat. I never heard that before today, to be honest with you guys. But last time I checked, the Earth was round. I've been on a plane before, and looked pretty round to me from 30,000 feet up in the air.
And this is just from me, this little old Dave Gillard speaking. I can care less if you believe the Earth is flat or you believe the Earth is round. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. I believe the Earth is round. If you want to believe the Earth is flat, that's on you. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. That is what you do. So if you out there and you believe the Earth is flat, hey, more power to you. I ain't got nothing to do with it. All I'm gonna do is keep cheering for the Knicks. That's all I got for you.
You know what?
Go ahead.
You know what? You know what, Dave? The Earth might actually be flat. If you're a Knicks fan and you think the Earth is round, I just can't. Yeah, I mean, you know, we laugh, but here's the thing: we laugh, but then there are people who actually believe these things, right? There are people who actually believe that Masons somehow we're controlling this. Put it like this, right? If the Earth is flat, and for some reason, some cabal of people somewhere decided to lie to people and say the Earth was round, I don't think that it was the Masons. I mean, you know, you got government, you got all type of people in the education system, what have you. So go argue with them. I mean, I don't know why we always the fall guys for every bad thing or whatever people want to believe out there. You know, I'm seeing stuff on here, people asking about Satanism and whatnot, which actually we probably could have covered, but we didn't. But you know, I think that the important thing is for brothers and non-members also. I mean, people always say do your own research and stuff, but even beyond doing research, I mean, I think that if you actually think about in your own family or in your own affiliate circle of your own acquaintances, people who you know who are Masons, if you're not one, or Eastern Stars. I mean, you know, I've met people who say, well, the Masons are this and they're that. And then I say, okay, well, do you have any Masons in your family? They say, yeah, but well, my grandfather, he's not with that stuff, but the rest of y'all ain't nothing. You know, has that happened to anybody else?
Oh yeah, I mean that's I don't know when it comes to stuff like that, and I literally, I mean, verbatim, I usually have the same saying when people speak about like how evil the craft is, and I've learned both as a professional, like in my professional, you know, social service setting that I work in every day, as well as raising kids. What I usually do is I'll ask a question to help them understand what they're saying doesn't make any sense. Again, so I'll say, so using your logic with Freemasonry in general, and even Prince Hall Freemasonry being evil. So you're saying that the organization whose members worked on the Underground Railroad to help enslaved Africans escape slavery, who fought for, you know, the rights and again, Africans to be freed, who started the first schools, newspapers, and other things shortly after slavery, who fought for the civil rights and died for the civil rights of folks, who started some of the first black churches, what Ken alluded to earlier. These people are evil and worship Satan. So after I say that, if they continue to say yeah, then I don't have a conversation with them, because you know they're coming at it from a perspective that not only I have a hard time respecting, it's gonna give me some type of mental headache. And I refuse now to waste my time, you know, because they're so set in their ways. Now, and again, the most interesting thing though is at one point in time, 9 times out of 10, the person that I'm engaging in conversation like that, at one point in my life, I more than likely believed in what they believed in, especially again, I was born in the 70s, raised in the 80s, went to college in the 90s. When you start talking about like stuff that was out there from Dr. York, the Nation of Gods and Earths and all that, I was down with all of that, more science of all of that. So I sometimes approach it from brother, you know, I'm trying to warn you and help you out so that you won't, you know, I'm not saying waste your time with it, because it helped me grow as an individual. But I see where sometimes they come from. But after a while, if they continue, after I put that out to them, if they continue on, I'm like, more power to you. There's nothing I can say.
You know what? You know what's funny? Some of these conversations, and that's why actually, James, I popped on the chat group, like you said, it's going down, and again, it's a repetitive cycle. It's a repetitive, no matter what you see, what you say, and if it's not going down right now in the chat group, it's going down somewhere else in another conversation. Whereas you know, it's a message of unity. It's a unity. Again, myths regarding the concepts of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is not I'm a Mason, I say I'm a Mason, you're supposed to recognize me. It doesn't work like that. I think about that the Facebook wall commercial. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Look, I just put a picture on my wall. No, that's not how Freemasonry works. Just because a person of African descent calls themselves a Freemason does not mean that Prince Hall Masons are automatically supposed to call them and have recognition with them. That's not how none of this works. And it's a farce if anybody is telling you that. Another thing, something that's happened even in my experience, where when we start dealing with, when they talk about Scottish Rite Masonry, well, you know, the 33rd degree, when you talk about the 33rd degree in the Scottish Rite, you're not a Scottish Rite Mason. Yes, you are. And even you guys, I'm a 32nd degree Mason. I'm a 33rd degree Mason. Oh, well, you don't know about the white Scottish Rite. You've never been to the white Scottish Rite. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because they have it's totally different. I've been there. I've attended their Supreme Council meeting. Oh, well, it's secret stuff. It's another group. And see, it goes from one step to another step to another step to another step. And I got argued down, and the guy's like, "You're not a 33rd degree Mason." I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm not? Are you sure?" And it's the automatic it's the automatic denial of the fact that we're not supposed to even be treading in those forms of waters. And I can say that's not only amongst the uninitiated, that can also be amongst some of the initiated from our counterparts, of seeing young men that are 32nd degree Masons in America, whereas the 18th degree overseas is the highest that most people end up going. That's the pinnacle. And everything above the 18th degree is considered, the administrative side. And when we get on chats, and again, that's why I say where most of this takes place is in social media, in the interactive sphere, in the internet. And when we interact with folks, they get thrown off. They're like, "Well, you're a 32nd degree Mason? You're a 33rd degree Mason? How? No, you're not." It's an automatic myth where you're not really. And not only that, if you're not, above 58 years old, you're not supposed to be a member of this stuff. But again, throughout this entire segue, the ebb and flow of the arguments, if you're not a part of the initiative experience and you've actually participated in it, how can you possibly tell people that are in what it is? Mm-hmm. And I find it hard. You can read every proceeding that we have. If you are not if you haven't been initiated, passed, and raised, you cannot tell me what I experienced, because it's something that each individual has to go through in order to become a member of it. And I know a lot of people like to read and say what it is, but it's not that until you actually experience it.
Something, Ken, I think that's interesting as well, talking about the experience versus reading and how we acquire knowledge, right? Our society has changed a lot over the past 100 years. Even the concept of sitting down and reading a book. That's why I mentioned earlier about how we're getting information from the era of books and newspapers and whatnot to now everything is on. Most people consume information via social media, and that can be good, but it can be very dangerous too. Because one thing that I think is interesting, all four of us happen to be grand historians from different states, but we'll have people who want to debate us, and they never actually put that same test of qualification to the people who they're getting the information from, right? So they'll say, well, I got this off YouTube and I looked at this particular individual, or I'm on this Facebook group or what have you. Well, did you actually, you're questioning my credentials. Did you actually go question the credentials of the people who gave you the stuff that you're coming to me with, right? The same thing, you know, folks are talking about flat earth, the people are talking about Satanism, people are talking about all type of stuff right now on the chat. Great. Did you actually qualify the people who gave you that information the same way that you're trying to qualify those of us who are trying to you know, correct some of the misinformation that's out there? You know, that's something that I think that people need to really ask themselves. You know, I've seen people, I spend time at the House of the Temple Library all the time, as does Brother Collins. And I've seen people come in there and want to debate and want to talk all this type of stuff and say that, well, y'all don't know nothing, but I got the information. And I've stood there and said, wait a minute, we're in a library. If anyone's been to the House of the Temple Library, which you can go to, it's a public library, thousands of books on Freemasonry, you know, but people want to tell the people who work there or in other similar places, well, y'all don't know nothing, but they're in the place with all the books, you know. So sometimes we can go off into la la land sometimes, but sometimes we got to keep our feet right here on earth before we start going off in different dimensions and whatnot.
And you know, and to that point too, I mean, there are certain things, you know, just using again, since we're on it, because it appeared on the chat a lot tonight, regarding whether the earth is flat or round. You know, I may have a viewpoint of it that may differ from other people, but it's going to be, I can respect your view if you can show me why. I've always been with why. Why do you believe that? You know, show me some evidence of your belief. You know, and even from a Masonic education standpoint, if make it a night. You know, okay, look, the third Wednesday we gonna get together, come down to the lodge. I'm gonna bring my evidence. Brothers bring the evidence, and we sit down, break bread, have a conversation about it. Because that's how you learn, that's how you teach, and that's how you spread knowledge. One thing that I can't stand is when people put stuff out there and then tell you to go look it up. You know, this, that, and the other. Go research it. No, you made the claim. From a research standpoint, I'll tell people, if you can do that with, you know, some folks that may not know, like if you come across a researcher and you say that, I can guarantee you're going to get this look. You know, because the onus is on you. If you're putting it out there, the onus is on you to back up what you're saying, not, you know, whatever, and then you go look it up. You know, you said it, where did you get it from? And then bring it forth. But I think a lot of times, you know, some of this stuff, because again, too, I didn't even know Freemasonry took a stance on whether the earth was flat or round. And all the books I read, I didn't even know, you know, we were responsible for having an official stance.
News to me
on that, right? You know, so if I'm going to speak on it, it's going to be a personal belief and not me as a Freemason, you know. But nevertheless, I find some of the things interesting. I think we lose opportunities to help each other learn and to teach each other different things when it comes to that, you know. So, you know, you have a conversation. Some of your lodge brothers may disagree with you. Say, okay, you know, have a date where everyone brings their stuff, and then let's research it and have conversations about it.
Well, you know, I think that we have to remember, guys, that for those of us who have not yet reached the 30,000th degree of Freemasonry, you know, we might not have all the information. So we have to bear that in mind. I mean, you know, that's the type of stuff that you hear on the internet. You know, it always, you know, and sometimes in person, unfortunately. I think that again, applying basic common sense. I mean, again, you know, to go back to this flat Earth thing. And by the way, we have somebody in the chat that said the flat Earth is flat stupid or something like that. That made me laugh, so I apologize. But that was funny to me. But to go back to it, I mean, you know, I look at it at one of the teachings of Freemasonry. We say that God or what have you is an architect, right? That's how we formulate things. So my question for people again would be, okay, if the earth is flat, why is it that a lot of the celestial bodies that we see are round, like the moon? I mean, there's nobody's going to debate, I hope, that the moon is circular in spherical in shape, right? We can look at other objects in space. So why would the Earth be a flat square or something? I mean, this makes this, again, common sense. The idea that, well, you're just not high enough. I've gotten to the point where I tell people, I say, look, why are you assuming that I'm not high enough? Why don't you just go ahead and throw me in there with the rest of the people? Well, it's hard to do that because I'm standing there in front of you, and for people who know me, yeah, I've got a bunch of degrees in masonry, but I still got to pay my cable bill. Well, no, I don't have cable. I'm a slinger, but y'all get where I'm coming from, right?
None of those commercials, man.
Yeah, we sling. We get the window open so the neighbors can watch. Yeah. But seriously, we got to keep your feet on the ground, folks. So yeah.
Brother James, something you said earlier that's been on my mind the whole show, and it's something that our deputy, and I'm definitely not trying to preach or anything. It's something that our deputy says all the time. It's our District Deputy Grandmaster Matthew Bonham. He's a Cowboys fan, so you gotta kind of take what he says with a grain of salt. I don't know, but he always says that you're somebody's first impression of what a Mason's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great. We go out into the community so that the community knows who we are. But if you have these brothers who still haven't learned how to subdue these little passions they have by getting drunk, slapping somebody in the bar, or trying to hit on another brother's wife, somehow these myths get started. Because if I'm a non-Mason and I see this Mason trying to holler at my wife, I'm gonna assume that this is what all Masons do. So you have to, I guess, basically police up those brothers that you see maybe doing these extracurricular stuff and tell them that, you're somebody's impression of what a Mason's supposed to be. So once these brothers can fix themselves, now we can go out into the community, because you don't want brothers going out just doing whatever. Right. And now they running wild in the community trying to hit on everybody's wives, and now our name is gonna get further into the mud. Right. So that's just been on my mind. I'm definitely not trying to preach. I make my mistakes too. I got my good friend, I know he's watching right now, Westmaster Lynch. We go way back to before I even came a Mason. He always pleases me up, man. That's my good friend. So I think we just got to do a better job of looking out for each other and keeping each other on the right path. That's just my 2 cents.
Good stuff.
You want to go to questions now?
Okay. We had so many questions in the chat room. I mean, it was kind of hard to keep up. I mean, somebody asked if we could talk about Satanism. I'll answer that real quickly. No, Freemasonry is not a religion, nor does it practice satanic worship or anything of that like. So, I mean, that's simple and plain. But again, I'll go back to my book here. Is it true what they say about Freemasonry by Arturo de Hoyos and Brent Morris? If you want to have a reference to go back to checking out about some of that stuff, they really deal with that information quite in plain English, but it's scholarly enough that if you feel like you want to do more research on it, you can do that. So yeah, Brother Gillum, do we have anything on the Facebook or any other social media?
I did see a couple on the and I believe this was kind of directed towards I have to find it again, but it was kind of directed towards your presentation about how the anti-Masonic movement affected Prince Hall Masonry.
Okay. Well, basically, this is a theory that I've kind of formulated over time in looking at it. Unfortunately, just like a lot of other aspects of history, the narrative of our Caucasian America becomes the narrative through which a lot of stuff is viewed, right? So one of the things that I believe it was It was Joseph Walks. Yeah, actually, it was Brother Walks that actually stated this in so many words. He stated that one of the interesting things about race relations in America is that oftentimes things that are good for white America are not good for Black America. And in reverse, things that are bad for white America a lot of times might be good for Black America. And this holds true throughout Masonic history. The Morgan Affair is probably one of the biggest examples of that. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the Caucasian lodges and Grand Lodges were negatively affected. The churches, you had an entire the third political party in America was the Anti-Masonic Party, right? Now, if you go back and research the Anti-Masonic Party, yes, I have found information, which I'm kind of holding back right now because I want to publish it, but I have found information where the Anti-Masonic Party did speak out against, at that time, what was called Negro Freemasonry, right? But again, this is mostly white people talking about us. But over time, what you will find is that these Masonic lodges and whatnot in the white community start folding up. But this is the period when you start seeing Prince Hall Masonry really expand into new states, new territories. During this time period, during the period when the white America was dealing with the Morgan Affair, you had the establishment of several Prince Hall Grand Lodges. One of the reasons why I think this is, and why we're able to get up and running and formalize a lot of things, I believe is linked to the history of American Masonic manufacturing companies, such as McCoy Publishing and what have you, and other similar ones of that day. Because all of a sudden, you had Masonic supply companies that were manufacturing aprons and, the early appearance of Masonic jewelry in America and stuff like that. All of a sudden, their customer base is not purchasing in terms of the white customer base. So it is my theory that this is how some of our early Prince Hall brothers begin accumulating Masonic books and other, jewels and whatnot early on, because these companies needed to sell their inventory off. Also, this is also the period where we see the growth of some of our appendant and concordant bodies. And I think that Brother Collins will back me up on this. This is the early rise of Prince Hall Scottish Rite Freemasonry is actually happening at the same time as the Morgan Affair. Brother Collins, am I right or am I wrong when I say that?
You're spot on, because right when the Morgan Affair is taking place, and James, just as another side note, if you look at something that's called, it's a minister by the name of Jedediah Morse. In 1799, he writes a pamphlet, and he's talking about Freemasonry. In particular, he's talking about the folks, the mulattoes from the West Indies coming to the United States. And the anti-Masonic movement started before the 1820s. It started, as early as 1799. When you take a look at this, because they're talking about this pastor in particular, he's talking about the Illuminati infiltrating the United States, and how the Negroes from Haiti and the French are coming to the United States on the Eastern Seaboard, and they're going to bring that rebellious Negro to the States, and that's the big kicker. But at the same time, that rebellious Negro that he's talking about is the same group of people that you're talking about, James, who are actually leaving the West Indies, the whites that are coming up, and they're propagating the Scottish Rite, and they're giving out the degrees, but they need this documentation. First of all, published. They need regalia, and that's where you see a lot of this stuff taking place. Matter of fact, the 1820s is right around the same time that you see Richard P.G. Wright joining the Delta Lodge of Perfection with the soon-to-be Sovereign Grand Commander, Giles Fonda Yates. So you have a Prince Hall Mason joining one of the New York lodges, and he winds up serving as the treasurer for the Delta Lodge of Perfection with the guy who winds up being the head of the the Northern Masonic jurisdictions Sovereign Grand Commander. So it's all tied in together.
Absolutely.
So the information is all there.
Absolutely. And one last thing that I think is another aspect that we have to look at as well, on top of the birth of Scottish Rite Masonry and whatnot in African American Freemasonry, is you also had back at that time period the traveling Masonic lecturers, right? And those of us who are members of our lodges and Grand Lodge, we know the important role that Grand Lecturers play. Well, this was a time period where Grand Lodges didn't have Grand Lecturers. A lot of folks don't know that. Lecturers really started out when you follow the history of Preston and Webb and whatnot. These are people who basically had rituals that were formulated. They would go throughout the countryside, hiring themselves out to lodges for some food and some money or what have you, and they would teach their version of Masonic ritual, which wasn't necessarily what the Grand Lodge of whatever state was practicing. Well, these people, when the Morgan Affair kicks off, they're now out of a job. They have rituals, they have instructions, and nobody in the Caucasian community to teach it to. Funny enough, when you look at some of our Prince Hall Masonic history, this is also a time period where you start seeing some of those individuals popping up in our lodges, as well as some of our Grand Lodges start establishing the position of a Grand Lecturer. Okay, so those are just some examples of how, in my opinion, the Morgan Affair affected Prince Hall Freemasonry. In a lot of ways, it was for our betterment, actually, in my opinion. But we'll see.
All right, we got another. I think it's a very good question. It came from our brother Christopher Lee. He said, "Did the PHA Masons have to sneak into meetings back in the day?"
No. I personally would say we didn't have to sneak into meetings because, first of all, they were trying people, and the second thing I would ask is, what is the timeline that they say the people were sneaking into meetings? I think H.R. Butler went to the Grand Lodge of England, where they were well aware of his status. Not only that, the correspondence from the past Grand Master, the Prince, one of the hierarchy, sending a letter to Willard Allen, recognizing him in his station and his dignity.
I think it was really kind of alluding towards us having to sneak into meetings because something may be done to us on the way to the meeting.
Well, this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
I
think early on in I want to say it was it Tennessee? I think it was in Tennessee's early Masonic history, that their first lodge, even though, and Brother Caffey helped me out on this one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of their first lodges in Tennessee or Kentucky, they were chartered. Technically speaking, they were in a slave state. So, but what they did was they actually were having meetings in Indiana, even though they were supposed to be over the border. But again, this was pre-Civil War in a slave state. We got these free black men. So what they would do is, even though they technically were in, I'm pretty sure it might have been Kentucky, one of those.
It was I know we had some brothers in Kentucky that would actually have to travel across the river.
To Indiana. Yeah, I think it's Kentucky. Is that where is that Meriwether, Jesse Meriwether and Bird Foster, I think it is. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, because we have some brothers like that had to do that even coming from Kentucky to Ohio.
Right.
They had to go over that river and to come to a lodge meeting. So it wasn't sneaking in as far as into the meeting, but it was like sneaking out of where they were to practice the craft. Mm-hmm. Which I respect those brothers and give them everything for that.
And absolutely. We had in Columbus there's one lodge I'm linking up with them. It won't be this week. It'll be after I return from Alaska. to get their lodge minutes, and they used to meet, and this is early 20th century, they would meet at midnight to basically sneak in and sneak out of the lodge, so to speak. And then we had another instance, like our first lodge in Columbus was Bradwell Lodge number 4. And a couple of years prior to that lodge forming, we had a big incident here where George Ashburn, who was white, was killed by the Klan. He was speaking at Temperance Hall with Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. And so afterwards, Bishop Turner, who was, openly speaking out against the Klan, and along with Reverend Sims, when they would come to Columbus, those minutes would state where exactly where Sims were staying, but it never said where Bishop Turner was going to be. And the rumor was he would stay out in the woods during the day and then come to the meeting at night, come into town at night under the cover of darkness. But one thing I can surely tell you that those minutes never state where Bishop Turner was going to be staying when he came into town. So there's definitely some truth to that myth.
Another topic that happened. I'm sorry, and I'll make this one quick. Another one that we have detailed in Alabama is Reuben R. Mims happened to be traveling to and fro lodge meeting, and he was shot in the leg by a white. There's two different storylines that go with it. Is one, they're stopping him from going because of his Masonic related activities, and he's shot in the leg multiple times. But the other is him going to Masonic, on his way to Masonic meeting, and it was the Democrats that actually went after him and attacked him. So under the cover of darkness, yes, that's why we did meet Reverend and I typically. So those things were happening. So on that end, yes. So I thought we were talking about the other side, sneaking in as far as trying to gain admission. No Tony Muhammad moments. So
shots fired.
Right.
Bang bang.
Right. Hey, brother. So
enjoy yourself.
Right. As we wrap up, I know we run over our traditional time, but I really enjoyed the conversation. There is one more question that someone asked, and if we could quickly, I want to get everyone's views on before we wrap up, because I think it's an important question, and it's, how does the panel address the leaders of the organizations when they perpetuate myths? So this is an internal thing where, what, as our roles as grand historians, as leaders, as researchers, how do we address those brothers that are in powers to be when they perpetuate myths?
Whew. Okay. I'll jump in the shoot first. You can't challenge them publicly. Don't do it unless you want your career to end. I guess there's a way to handle everything. If that person, let's say he's your worship master in your lodge, he's your worship master, and he's perpetuating a myth in the lodge, don't challenge him in the lodge in front of everybody. He's still, like, when you in a leadership position and somebody openly challenges you, you're gonna push back. That's your natural reaction. It's gonna happen. So if nothing that positive is gonna come from that exchange, maybe pull them off to the side. Say, hey brother, hey, can we talk after the meeting? Or, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Let's meet up for lunch. And then you show them your documentation as to why what he presented is not exactly correct. But you're doing this one-on-one, and they may be like, oh shoot, I didn't even know that. This is what I've been told from X, Y, and Z. And I just thought it was true because brother such and such is such a great person. And now you'll be able to win that over. But you don't I wouldn't advise you to challenge them publicly. This is gonna end badly. And that's my 2 cents.
If I'll do this one rather fast. In my experience with some of the leaders I ended up working with, I ended up talking to them, off. I'm big on getting memos together and talking offline. Hey, did you know this? Something very interesting, and I shoot them the information. I've done my job as a historian. I talked to them verbally, and I've also sent them documentation, and I have something in writing to back it up. What they do with it afterwards, it's not my it's not my role to spoon feed people. I can tell you one situation. We were at the United Supreme Council, and the Imperial Potentate Carl Parker was there, and he says, "Well, when we did something with PHO and and the compact, and we agreed to it, in the and I couldn't believe it because I'm trying to make a point, and when someone in that level is perpetuating an absolute boondoggle, and I just got to the point where I just sat back in my chair, I threw my hands up, and that's when you say okay, and sometimes you just got to let certain things go, because in certain instances, Dave, you're absolutely right. It is depending upon the individual. You think you can have a conversation with someone in a public setting because we're having that type of dialogue, and you don't believe the amount of just brain boof, as my cousin Anthony Conley would say, boof. The brain fart that some people could just utter out of their mouth and be leaders of national organizations. I couldn't. Sometimes you just got to let it go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer in teaching leaders before they become leaders. So this is why I like the process that we have when we bring brothers into the lodge and the educational systems that we put in place, giving them the correct information. Because I tell senior deacons this and brothers that work with candidates this all the time. Always assume that a person that you're instructing is either going to become a worshipful master one day or a grand master one day. So it's your job to put them set a strong foundation up so that when they get up to that point, they have a respect for Masonic education and also the truth. Because once someone gets up in that position, like you said, it can be difficult. So instruct brothers from as soon as they come into the lodge. So, go ahead, brother.
Just to take this, I think we're all leaders in the organization that we're in. This is the organization of leaders. Some of us have more leadership roles and responsibilities than others, but I think that the way you do that is with respect to them first as a person, but also to respect as yourself also. I'm not one really to cower, because somebody has a position or anything of that nature. However, with that being said, I try to show people the respect that I would want, because I've been corrected with things. I've had people tell me, "Oh, you said something wrong" or something like that. It may not be historical; it could be something else. But I just try to be respectful and play my position, especially when we're interacting with people from other grand lodges and all these different bodies and things of that nature. You never want to put yourself in a precarious position, or someone else. And that's something that I've learned being a Grand Lodge officer from DC. Because if you can go out there and say something, and you don't have to be a Grand Lodge. You could just be from your lodge. You may say something, and then it gets back to your worshipful master, or it gets back to this one, and then the story is different. And you don't want to be that person, even if you're telling the truth. So I like I said, my biggest thing is in all things, let's do things with respect, friendship, and brotherly love first, and then we get the information and whatnot. Because we can have respectful debate and dialogue. That's the key.
Indeed. All right, thank you, brothers. Closing thoughts, Brother Gilmar.
Oh man, I think it's been an excellent show. I mean, we hammered out some myths, and I think we still could have went another hour and ironed out some more myths. Hopefully, this helped everybody. This show helped dispel some of those myths, especially the Dr. King one. Hopefully, we never see that ever again. I just want to thank everybody for for your support. You know, it means a lot when we go to different places and brothers like, oh, you know, I watched the Prince Hall think tank and I appreciate what you're doing, or just they'll sit in a random inbox. To you, it may not mean too much, but to us, at least to me, it really means a lot that you're taking your time to tell us thanks, and that truly means a lot to me. As always, man, you know what time it is. It's the St. Louis Cardinal time. So so this is our season. We need another batter. So for all you Redbirds fans and everybody who really secretly wants to be Redbird fan, get your jerseys ready, get your hats ready. This is gonna be our year. And see you all next month.
All right. Brother Morgan.
I feel like Dave's sports teams are a Masonic myth in and of themselves. Like can we do that as another episode?
Right.
Like the myths of
the New York Knicks.
Right. Like, seriously. No, thank in all seriousness, thank everybody. You know, I echo the comments of Brother Gillon. I definitely want to give a major shout out and appreciation to the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of New Jersey, Lodge of Research and Education, with works for Master Michael Wiggins, who's also the Junior Grand Warden there, Grandmaster Tyson Rasul Dawood, who just celebrated a birthday. They hosted me for a book talk on my book, The Lost Empire, and that book sold out that day. So that was really, really, important to me, and I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who's been coming out and supporting the book. I had a author talk here at the African American Civil War Museum in DC. I'm coming into New Mexico next week for the Philaxis conference. So everybody be on the lookout for that. If you're down in the Southwest, I look forward to seeing you. Other than that, I'm just happy to be here, and I look forward to seeing everybody next month.
All right, Brother Collins.
Well, it's been good seeing everybody and being back with the team. And, like I said, this is a very interesting topic. And, it comes down to, like we say, having a conversation with people. And, there's a difference between giving people respect and also coddling them. And in terms of what, when you get to a particular set point, in order to be able to have a discussion or to be a leader, I think leaders should be well-rounded individuals. No matter what organization you're a member of, you should know the history of your organization. You should know the rules of your organization. You should know the dogmatic practices of your organization, and you should also know the constitutional makeup of your organization that you call yourself a member of. Can everyone do that? No, absolutely not. But I think that each and every person who joins a particular organization should. Do they do that? Are my expectations too high? Absolutely. But that's what I hope to see in leaders, not of the past. I'm talking about leaders going forward, where even in your own jurisdictions where things are going on, you can say, hey, Grant, I want to talk to you about this. This is something I think you might be interested in. This is the book that I just got, and it has something very interesting in it. I've already highlighted it for you. Take a look at this. There's ways that you can be agents of change in your organization, even if you don't have some lofty title. Brother is the highest title that we're supposed to have in Freemasonry. And then just go into him and say, hey, take a look at this. That's not right. You might not like the guy who wrote it. It doesn't matter, because if you look at the documentation, you can see that it's real. Anywho, like I said, glad to be back on with everybody again today. So sad. I'm still in mourning that Alabama are not the national champions. But hey, what's funny is when we win, New England loses. So hey, we lost. New England won. Hey, hope New England loses next year. Good to see everybody again.
Thanks, brothers, and thanks to our viewers for the great questions and comments. I briefly I want to thank also Dr. Dwight. And I'm going to tell a very brief story about why I'm thanking Dr. Dwight and how Dr. Dwight took me from being someone that read books to a researcher. My sophomore year in college at The Ohio State University, I took a African American Studies class, and I can recall one day Dr. Dwight was up lecturing about something, and me being the cocky sophomore kid that I was that thought I knew everything, started challenging her in class. So she had me, she asked me, like, well, where was I getting all this information from? And I told her, like, I got it from Message to the Black Man by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So she said, okay, well, bring that book to class the next day. I said, okay, I will. So I brought the book to the class the next day, and she asked me to stand up and read the passage that I was quoting from the previous day, and I did. So she said, okay, now turn to the back of the book and read me where he sourced his information from. Like, where did he get that information from? So I said, okay. So I turned to the back of the book, and if you've ever read Message to the Black Man before, there's no bibliography or anything back there. So there I was standing up in class, everyone looking at me like I was crazy. And she said, you know, I didn't do that to embarrass you, but I did do it to teach you a lesson that if you're going to get up and say anything or quote someone, make sure that that person has researched what they've written so that you can rely on something. So she helped me understand that. She helped me change my focus of who I started reading and checking their sources out. And like I said, she took me from being a reader of materials to a researcher. So I don't know if she's looking, I don't know where she's at, but I'm just putting out in the atmosphere. One day maybe she'll happen upon this video, and I would personally like to say thank you. I know I gave you some headaches, but thank you. So thanks for joining us tonight. We hope you gained a little insight, and we hope you join us for future broadcasts of the Prince Hall Think Tank. As always, have a good evening, and remember, let's teach Masonry in our lodges. Thank you.